To the average person, fire is about comfort. It's about warmth. To the alchemist, it's about destruction, annihilation. For you to step forward into your true whole self, the old self must be burned to dust. That is the power of the first stage of spiritual alchemy. That is the power of calcination. All right. I promise not to be too serious about everything because, to be honest, to be able to get through something like spiritual alchemy, you have to have a sense of humor. Today, we're going to be talking about the first stage of spiritual alchemy, calcination. In the middle of 2024, I experienced my calcination event, and I dove into the world of spiritual alchemy. And when I did, I searched for something that could make this information accessible to me as someone who autistically watches television, and I couldn't really find anything, so now I'm making it. I think that there's a lot that can be gained by looking at different stories and learning what calcination can look like. If you have any questions at the end of this video, which I hope you will, comment. Tell me about it. I want to know. I want to answer to the best of my ability. And if I don't know the answer, then I want to research or I want to find out together. So thank you for joining me today as we dive in to calcination. I don't know, guys. I feel like I'm being too serious here. For centuries, alchemists were seen as mad scientists trying to turn lead into gold. But the magnum opus, the great work, was always a philosophical quest for perfection. They called it the transmutation of the base metal into gold, which is really just us being transformed into our highest potential. The spiritual path borrows this chemical map. We are the lead and the philosopher's stone. The ultimate goal is the fully awakened, integrated self. To get there, we must navigate 7 intense, distinct phases of consciousness. Calcination is just phase 1.
It is growth, then decay, then transformation. It is fascinating, really.
Chemically, calcination is simple. You heat a substance in a crucible to an extreme temperature. You do this until it's reduced to a fine gray powder called calx or ash. The sulfur, the moisture, the impurities, they're driven off as smoke and gas. Spiritually, the process is identical. The crucible is your life. The intense pressure is the fire, and that fire's entire purpose is to incinerate the impure, unexamined parts of the self. It burns the false structures of the ego and your self-delusions, leaving behind only the essential, resilient ash of humility and clarity. Okay, so let's get into the theoretical framework of it all, which means that we're going to turn over to Carl Jung. He put it into a map that is easily accessible now, and that's been a great gift to me. So he believed that the alchemical process was a framework that could be used to explain the growth of the self, the spiritual self, the psyche. So we have our premateria, right? We have our base metal, and that is our ego, our persona, the mask that we attach to feel in control, the mask we attach to that is connected to our pride, to our fear of vulnerability, for our need for external validation. Our mask is impure because it's not who we are. It's constructed safety. It is a safety mechanism that we've built over time because we've had to. We all have it because we've needed it, but it's time for it to go. Okay, so this is where the fire comes in, right? The structural integrity of our persona, of our mask is gone. This is a large event, whether it be an internal fire like trauma therapy, somatic therapy, facing some deep held trauma, or external flame, which is something like losing a job, losing a relationship, having something else in your life break down, or maybe all three. And it shows us that the entire foundation that our sense of identity has been built on is gone. Only then can we start to surrender to the flame. we're going to feel rage. Rage is going to be that gas, that smoke burning off, the volatility burning off, until we get to the turning point of humility, of acceptance of the moment. Then we can truly surrender to the power of calcination. That sounded so serious. Oh my God. Then we can truly surrender. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, but we can truly surrender to this life-altering dark night of the soul that's here to dismantle everything we believe about ourselves, about our world, about people in our world. This is a moment that's going to completely shift the trajectory of your life. And how you deal with it is up to you. So now that we have the kind of baseline or the idea of what it is, let's dive in on some case studies of different people or characters in media that show us what this process looks like. First, let's talk about calcination toward power. The first example I'd like to talk about is Walter White from Breaking Bad, the magnified ego. He starts as this fearful, repressed teacher, and then he's hit by the fire of a terminal cancer diagnosis. This fuels his desire for control. In season 1, episode 6, the meek Walter is violently burned away and the Heisenberg persona is forged in the blast. By season 5, he is a perfectly calcined, crystallized figure of ruthless will. He found his essence, but that essence was pure ego. Next up, let's talk about Willow Rosenberg from Buffy, the tyrant ego, specifically later seasons of Buffy, although we definitely see the peak of her original persona in season 1 in her sweaters and her long hair. Willow Rosenberg's base metal was the good girl, a persona built on being the dependable, shy sidekick. Her impurities were a deep-seated sense of inadequacy and a growing addiction to external power. Her secret fire was the sudden violent loss of Tara, which turned her internal grief into a literal scorching weapon. In the flaying of Warren, we see the most brutal form of calcination. The compassionate Willow is incinerated, and the dark Willow persona is forged in the heat of vengeance. The volatiles of her human empathy are driven off as smoke, and her tyrant ego views her former self as a weak impurity to be discarded. The next part of the case study I want to look at is calcination for wholeness, bringing ourselves into a more whole form. Let's talk about Fleabag. And there's a few different times in Fleabag I can talk about, but I specifically want to talk about the priest, because why wouldn't we want to talk about the hot priest, am I right? Fleabag's impurity was the fourth wall, her psychic crutch, turning to the camera and talking to you directly. When the priest calls her out on it, it starts to dismantle this defense mechanism. Her fire was crushing guilt that was focused by the hot priest. And in the confession scene, there's a violent expulsion of her core toxic secret. By the finale, the ash of vulnerability is revealed as she waves goodbye to us, incinerating her need to hide. So here's an interesting shift I'm going to take here, which is I'm going to go back to Willow for this section. Willow offers a rare look at a double calcination. If Tara's death was the fire of hate, Xander's yellow crayon speech, I feel like I'm saying crayon wrong. Crayon. Is it a crayon? I don't know. Anyway, the speech that Xander makes about the yellow crayon is the fire of unconditional love. This secondary heat doesn't burn the world. It melts the dark Willow shell. As she breaks down on the bluff, the rage finally exhausts its fuel. This is the moment of surrender. She's reduced to the white ash. All her masks, the shy girl and the dark queen, have been burned away. She is left in a state of total raw humility. She isn't cured, she's purified. She is now the essential, resilient ash ready to be rebuilt from the ground up. Another great example of calcination for wholeness is Joy from Inside Out. Joy's impurity was control. In the memory dump, her old methods fail, burning away the volatile of solo competence. She incinerates her ego of purity and control by handing the memories to sadness, leading to emotional balance. She realizes that this idea that it can only be joy is actually an illusion. She's reached with humility when she lets go of this identity that she's been attached to for so long. All right, let's jump into the final section of case study here with what I like to call the failed or perpetual calcination. What if the individual resists the lesson? Kendall Roy in Succession is a tragic failure. He tries to use the fire of his father's abuse to forge power rather than humility. The result is a brittle, unstable version of his old ego trapped forever in a cycle of fire. Calcination is only successful when you accept the ash as a foundation for genuine change. But if you have a toxic desire for power that you will reach for instead of humility, you're going to fail. So let's look at some examples. The first one I think about is Kendall's birthday, season 3, episode 7. He sets up this ego fortress, a multi-million-dollar elaborate event. And everyone comes to see the spectacle. No one comes to spend his birthday with him. His siblings mock him. His dad doesn't even show up. He just sends him a card. And instead of accepting the ash, Kendall has a breakdown over missing presents from his children. He retreats into a pile of gifts, unable to sit with the void of everything, and he fails to find humility and instead lapses back into this defensive, hollow despair. Season 3 is pretty heavy on the calcination events. In episode 9 of that season, we see him reduced to bone by the weight of the waiter's death and his failed coup. He sits in the dust and admits that he's not a good person. This is a rare moment where the false king ego is completely incinerated. But the thing about this one is that the failure is communal. When he's ready to be transformed, his siblings, specifically Roman, immediately try to reconstruct his ego using the same toxic materials that burned him. Roman jokes about the death to make Kendall feel better, effectively pouring cold water on the alchemical fire and preventing a true breakthrough. A third example would be season 4, episode 6, where he tries to bypass the purification process completely by creating this new super being persona. He enters this manic state promising that everyone can live forever to his investors, and the fire is this immense pressure of the market and the ghost of his dad. He mistakes a temporary high for a permanent transformation. Instead of the gold of a stable leader, he creates a mirage. He celebrates by swimming in the ocean, dissolution, but he's not actually dissolved or reborn. He's merely buoyant on a sea of manic delusion that eventually crashes in the series finale. Which is, I think, a great place to step forward. Season 4, episode 10. The final absolute calcination where the crucible of the Waystar boardroom destroys his identity as the heir, the eldest boy. Shiv's no vote is the final flame. In the glass room, he screams, "I am the eldest boy!" God, I immediately, as I yell that, just all I can think of is Community. I am the truest repairman. But anyway, moving on. This is the poisoning ego, as described in alchemical texts, fighting desperately for survival. But because his entire true self was predicated on being CEO, when that identity burns away, nothing's left but a ghost. The final shot of him looking at the water represents a man who has been calcined but has no essence left to move to the next stage of the work. Like I said earlier, calcination is successful only when you accept the ash as a foundation for genuine change. But what if you burn for so long that the ash is not a foundation for anything? And that's the tragic reality of Kendall Roy. The perpetual calcination. So calcination is the flashpoint. It is the moment when everything changes forever. It's not fun, but it is so, so powerful. You'll know that you've made it through calcination because you're rested in humility and acceptance. You've accepted that what once was no longer is. You've let go of your attachment to that mask, but you can't stop there. That ash is dry and it's brittle and it needs to be transformed. So after calcination, we take a step into water with dissolution. If calcination was about burning away the superficial self, the persona, the mask, dissolution is about dissolving the fundamental building blocks that we built that persona on. So join me next time when we step into transformative waters together. And yeah, I'm probably going to film it in my bathtub. I look forward to seeing you then.